A beautiful afternoon to you, ladies and gentlemen, viewers of my Media Prime Television, The African Eye. Thank you for joining us for this other edition of your program, 90 Minutes in Africa, your Pan-African show that takes a look at issues affecting Africa and how issues both internally and externally and how they affect our day-to-day life and suggesting solutions to the problems raised during our program. In today's edition of the program, 90 Minutes in Africa, we are going to be taking a look at Africa's trillion upon trillion dollars worth of resources, but yet poor. Who is supposed to be blamed? Africa's trillion upon trillion dollars, trillion upon trillion dollars worth of resources, yet poor. Who is to be blamed? And according to the United Nations Organization, Africa alone is home to about 30% of the world's mineral reserves, 12% of the world's oil, and about 8% of the world's natural gas reserves, as well as 40% of the world's gold, 90% of the world's chromium and platinum. But how come that we are tapped a poor continent and unable to make good use of the resources that have been placed at our disposal by nature? Thank you for joining us. For those who are online on Facebook, you can get to my page, to the page, my Media Prime Television, and share to as many groups as possible to invite others to watch. You can also tell us where you're watching from by writing on the comment section on Facebook. And for those who are watching us from the comfort of their homes, wherever you find yourself in Africa, you can send us a message using the number you find on your screen, either on WhatsApp or on normal SMS. We have our guest with us, Apostle Ambe Valentine Ngwa is already there. He is our guest and our consultant on my Media Prime. Thank you so much, Apostle Ambe Valentine, for coming for this program.
A very good afternoon to you, Elvis, and a good afternoon to all Africans fixed on your screens this afternoon. In the studios, it's 15 minutes past 1 o'clock Cameroon time, and we welcome you to today's show. And we are trusting God that we're going to do a very effective delivery of information as far as this topic is concerned. Stay glued to your screen as we educate you concerning this subject, with Africa full of trillions of dollars resources, yet every head in Africa is poor.
Thank you, Apostle Ambe. We are going to be joined a moment from now by our two experts via Skype. We have Elijah Enoaku, who is a senior researcher on African development in Leeds University. He is going to be joining us from Canada to talk about these issues, as well as we're also going to be joined by Dr. Richard Munang. He is a policy development expert, who is, of course, going to be joining us from Nairobi, Kenya, to talk about these issues. You can also send in your own contribution to the show, and of course, maybe the producer should put the topic of discussion: Africa's trillion upon trillion of dollars worth of resources, yet poor. Who is to be blamed? Apostle Ambe, of course, have been able to, while doing research for the program, I was able to do like a resume of some of the issues, some of the things or the people that should be blamed as far as the poor management of our resources is concerned. I mentioned, I took a look at governance challenges, national policy directions, poor investment decisions, revenue management, neocolonialism, weak institutions, poor policy choices, as well as so many other facts and points that you and my other external guests are going to be raising. So when we talk about Africa's natural resources, Apostle Ambe, I wanted to give an idea to our viewers about the natural resources at the disposal of this beloved continent, Africa.
Yes, Africa is home to the highest natural resources in the world, Elvis, because right back during the Industrial Revolution, the Europeans did not have enough raw materials to satisfy their machines and the industries that they created in Europe. They started heading towards Africa. Until date, almost everyone focuses towards Africa. The paradox and the irony is that Africa is named the poorest continent in the world, yet containers of raw materials leave this continent every day to other parts of the world. As a matter of fact, every country in the world is focusing towards Africa. People don't go to a place that has nothing to offer. People don't go to a place that has nothing substantial to benefit them. People don't scramble. You've never heard about the scramble of Europe. You never heard the scramble of Asia or the scramble of America, because those environments have nothing to offer. People only scramble where there are resources. We have read and studied in history about the scramble of Africa. This scramble of Africa was because Africa is home to so many resources, and it is beyond human explanation. Nigeria stands as the 11th world oil power in the world and the highest in Africa. Nigeria is a base of almost how many wells of oil? That is another source. We go to Lubango in Angola, you have huge deposits of oil also in Lubango in Angola. Botswana has the highest, the best diamond in the world. Niger has the best uranium in the world. Ghana has the best gold in the world. Ethiopia has the best coffee in the world. Cote d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast has the best cocoa in the world, and we can name it and name it and name it and name it and non-stop. This is to let you understand that we don't just have resources, but we have the best quality resources in the world. This is to call our attention that something is definitely wrong where men are sitting on riches yet they are not prosper. I think we have to distinguish between the place of human resource and natural resource. Natural resource or natural resources become relevant in the society. And this is where we come back to the place of going to trace back the history of Africa. You see, Elvis, we keep talking that the Europeans came to Africa and they exploited us and they did this and they did that. But I think we should go past that stage and get to a point whereby we should start acknowledging some of the flaws and the misfortunes that have befallen us in this Africa. For instance, if you hear about the richest man in the Malian Empire, you had the Songhai Empire, you had the Ghana Empire. Those were empires that ruled in those days. You heard about wealthy men. The wealthy men were not wealthy because they sold gold and silver. They were not wealthy because they transformed cocoa to chocolate. They didn't get rich because they transformed coffee to tea. They didn't get rich. They got rich because they sold slaves. These men were rich because they sold slaves. And since slavery was abolished, the source of their income and their businesses collapsed. And since they had not built reputable industries on what they were doing in the past, there was definitely nothing for them to lean on. These are the things we have to start pointing out. How many countries in Africa had credible industries? How many countries in Africa had advanced technology? How many countries in Africa traded with the same product they have around us? It has always been somebody taking those products from us, making them have value, and then selling them back to us 10 times. So when you talk about Africa had enrichment around the 14th century, the 14th century was a period of slavery and slave trade, where you had the triangular slave trade, where slaves were brought from Africa, taken to America, worked in the plantations, produced cotton, sugarcane, which were now transported as raw materials to Europe, processed in Europe as finished product like rum, mirrors, and brought back to Africa. So from Africa to America, America to Europe, Europe and back. That's the triangular slave trade. What were we doing within that period as business? What investment did we do at that time? It means our business within that period was to sell slaves. And how did we get to the point of selling slaves? The initial stage of selling slaves had certain rights in the 14th century. But as the years went by, slaves had no right. They had to fight war to catch others, become fugitives, and then sell them as slaves. Let me explain this. I think I have to explain this foundation. When they started selling people as slaves, there was a need for them to build a strong army. This strong army was to do what? To fight neighboring communities and then capture slaves and then sell and make much money. So much money was invested on ammunition. That same scenario repeats itself this very day today, where we have African leaders who will put billions upon billions on ammunitions, but they cannot put billions in the growth of the economy. So you discover that the problem we have in Africa is not the absence of material resource or natural resource, it's the absence of human resource. This human resource in this context, not talk about the absence of men, but absence of minds. There's a difference between the absence of men and the absence of minds. Men can be available, but there are no minds. When you see African leaders in every country, they invest more in the military to consolidate power rather than investing in the economy.
But Apostle Ambe, of course, I will come back to you to get to question. Maybe I just question you directly on that before I get to Elijah Nwaku and Dr. Richard Munang. You're talking about the absence of minds, but I think we have some of the greatest minds here in Africa. Some of them are here. Probably they have been poorly educated, but we have very great minds from Africa in the diaspora that we can tap from.
Those in the place of leadership.
Okay.
Those in the place of leadership. Our leaders are doing the same thing that the slave master did in those days. They invested more in weaponry, in protecting their sphere of influence, consolidating power, and capturing neighboring communities to sell as slaves, rather than investing in the economy. If they tell the amount of money that goes out every year from Africa in the name of security, buying of arms and protecting offices and stools in presidencies, if that money is judiciously used to invest in the great talents, skills, and potentials we have in Africa, we'll go far. Three things give men money. You make money for who you are, you get money for who you do, and you also get money for what you're possible to do. Tiger Woods plays golf. He gets money from what he does. There is another comedian who makes money for who he is. And there is somebody who makes money like Bill Gates because of what people do for him. What do we do in Africa? All the resources we have, look for instance, we are in Cameroon, the amount of money invested in security to consolidate someone in power, in fighting a reckless war. If that amount of money is bundled and put on you, Elvis, and me, I'm telling you, the economic aspect of this nation will boom. And it goes around the continent Africa. So I'm trying to make some points here.
I get you. I get you. Thank you, Apostle Dr. Ambe Valentine. I get now to Elijah Nwaku. Are you there? Oh, it appears that Elijah Nwaku is not. Okay, Elijah. Elijah, okay, thank you. First of all, I wanted to greet the viewers, greet the viewers already. Elijah Nwaku is a senior researcher on African development at the Leeds University. He's joining us from Canada. Elijah, do you share with share Apostle Ambe's view that we are where we are today? What should be blamed is the absence of minds in Africa, that can take the continent forward.
Viewers all over the world, friends in Nigeria who are watching, a lot of people are watching this program. In Ghana, in Uganda, in Botswana, and other places, I greet you all. First and foremost, I want to say that what's happening to Africa is a tragedy.
We get to you.
Just a second. I think the studio just sent me a message. Okay, as I said, what is happening to Africa is a tragedy. Because just based on the enormous wealth that we have in Africa, being the richest continent in the world, it's an eyesore and tragedy to see Africa where we are. But I will put it squarely on the feet of Africans. It is the lack of political will to do good, to use the resources of the continent to solve the problem of the continent. That is the number one problem we're having in Africa. We do know that there's an effect of slavery. We do understand that there is colonization and new colonization. All those things do play a part. But number one problem in Africa is Africans. Because contemporary leadership that has succeeded has shown us that if we have leaders in Africa that have the will of the people at heart, that have the people that have the political will, the courage to stand up and do the right thing, Africa will not be where we are today. Because, as I said before, let us go to contemporary presidents that have succeeded. Africa today is celebrating Thomas Sankara. Everybody talks about Thomas Sankara. Burkina Faso is still the colony of France. France was still trying to influence, but we saw what that man did in 4 years. 4 years. A man brought literacy from 13% to 73%. What is the literacy rate in Cameroon? 77%. What is the literacy rate in Nigeria? 60%. How did he do it? Did he use magic? He didn't use any magic. A man sold up all the Mercedes of the country and said everybody should be running on Renault 5. A man reduced the salary of civil servants, including his own. And they decided to be driving around in bikes. A man that decided to do afforestation. A country that was a desert country today is exporting timber. How did he do it? That is a man that has the political will to change the situation of the people. So the problem of Africa is African. The leadership in Africa is the problem we have. How can a country be living on close to $57 trillion worth of resources and the continent is poor? You tell me the richest country in Africa, somebody will be thinking that is Nigeria. It's not even Nigeria. The richest country in Africa is the Democratic Republic of Congo. But go and see the wallowing poverty that's happening in that country. Why? Because there is no leadership that has the balls and the courage to take on bold initiative and change the direction of the country. That is the number one problem we're having in Africa. Yes, there's the effect of slavery and neo-colonialism and all these things, but that is not the problem, because we have seen contemporary leaders in Africa who have the good political will to change things. We've seen them do things. So the problem is Africa. That is the number one problem. The leadership in Africa, that is the number one problem.
Thank you, Elijah Enoaku. Let's now move to Nairobi, Kenya, to join Dr. Richard Munang, who is a policy development expert. Of course, he is a regular face on my Media Prime, and this is the first time he is participating on your Pan-African show, 90 Minutes in Africa. Dr. Richard Munang, I was just going through research, and I saw that the United States, for instance, provides more than $311 million in emergency and food assistance for people affected by major food crises in the Sahel and West African regions. How can we understand this, that we are a country, we are a continent with trillions upon trillions of dollars worth of resources, yet we are being provided emergency food aid?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Elvis, and to the panelists for having me on this very prestigious show. And I couldn't agree more to what panelists have already put forward, but let me put it in perspective. The reality of the situation we face in Africa today is that of mindset. The ideology and the false narrative that has been driven for quite a very long time is that Africa's poverty is lack of material. And as a result of that, that has disabled the mind, what I call emotional poverty of many citizens, to think that they can be able to have when they have not put effort. A story is told of someone who was very, very sick in a Western hospital, and this person came from a very poor home. But this person decided that every day he will be able to go out and get fresh air, but as he goes out, he looked around in the hospital and picked those who are quite very, very sick to go out with them. What does this story tells us? We have to aim up and not aim down. Of course, the continent have got mineral resources, which, as panelists have already alluded to, after the independent dispensation, when our founding fathers fought for self-determined rule, the biggest mistake that caused today was that they did not empower the citizens to become the very resources they were fighting to protect, and actually help to retool those citizens to add value to those material. Instead, they decided to focus on exporting without adding value, and therefore the citizenry were left out of the playing stage to know that to be able to create wealth, you have to add value. To be able to create wealth, you have to retool your skills and create value for yourself to be able to drive transformational development. And missing that art for 60 years, we have complained. And we have then equated poverty to mean living on less than $1 a day. And that takes me to this very point that I want to really put in perspective before I get to answer your question on the aid that comes to food security. First of all, what is the scale of poverty that Africa measures herself against? A mother who lives in a village in a mud thatched house, but eats fresh food, doesn't have any debt to pay, have access to clean drinking water from a well, and doesn't have any debt. Is she poor? And there is a young person who is highly employed and earns 300,000 francs, maybe in a city in Douala, or 500,000 Kenyan shillings, or 10,000 nairas, etc., and is unable to pay rent, it's in debt, doesn't eat nutritious food, live in a city that is polluted, resulting to choking his or her lungs. Is that person rich or poor? So the point I'm bringing this is that in as much as we can look at our natural resources and talk about lack of value addition and talk about extraction not benefiting the continent and resulting to underdevelopment, we need to then look at which kind of development do Africa want. Is it a development that is benchmarked with others? Or is it a development that when you have more money, you are developed? And then now when you now look at the issue that you brought up of aid, especially when it comes to security. In the past 15 years, over 15 billion has come to the continent to address only food security issue. But today we have 257 million people who go to bed hungry. So if the issue was money, why are people still hungry? So the issue is not money alone. The issue is we do not add value to what we produce. The issue is we are also mentally starved to believe that if we are not given things, then we cannot be able to do what we can do using what we have, not only focusing on what we don't have. Because there is really nowhere where you can be able to transform. And then lastly, the aspect of leadership is true, but the leaders come from the very citizenry that the continent is made up of. After the independent dispensation, the citizenry that were groomed to focus on what is in it for me, rather than what can I do to be able to turn challenges into opportunities. The citizens were groomed to think that when you finish a degree, you must get a white-collar job, rather than thinking of what can I do to solve a community challenge to turn it into an opportunity. The citizens were groomed to complain and apportion blame to others except themselves, so that at least, and then that group of citizens ended up in leadership positions. And today, we are getting what we actually deserve. You can't eat your cake and have it. And so that model needs to change.
Thank you, Dr. Richard Munang. He is a policy development expert joining us there from Nairobi. Apostle Ambe, we come back to the studio now to recenter the ball before we we pass it on to Dr. Richard Munang and Elijah Nwaku. I want you to continue from where they ended, because they seem to share the same viewpoint with you, that it's a problem of mindset. And we understand when we listen to those who are talking from the diaspora, we understand that also many of those who are ruling Africa now were people who were once in the diaspora. I mean, starting from Cameroon to other African countries, they studied in the diaspora, they studied these values of mindset, of how to work for the community and not for their personal pockets. What happens? Is there a kind of a spirit that once they come back home and they're given positions of responsibility, they think more about their stomachs instead of thinking about the general public?
You see, there is a normal phenomenon. We believe that the imperialists still have a foothold on most of our leaders in Africa, and they are still controlling the activities in our countries through our leaders who, in quotes, are puppet leaders. But I beg to disagree on this platform that a leader who is a leader doesn't need much to turn into something outstanding. Most of the people who have made money in life did not have the kind of capital that some of our leaders are left with. For instance, if they are exploiting us, they take 70% and give us 30%. Every leader who has the skill and capacity can still turn that 30% to 100%. If you and I are giving 10,000 francs and I give you 3,000, I take 7,000 francs, the difference between the money that I have with that, what you have is my mind. It's not a figure. That's why I tell people that you are not rich based on what you have in your pocket. You are rich based on what you have in your head. What you have in your hand is legal tender. Legal tender is not money. Legal tender is the substance that is used for exchange. Money is what is in your mind. So if you tell me that the Europeans are exploiting Africans and taking at least 65% of their resources, the balance 35 that is left in your hand, what do you do with it? That is a problem. Let us consider the fact that we are victims of slavery, colonization, marginalization, imperialism. And that imperialism does not take everything that belongs to us. It leaves at least 30%. A white man will take the remaining 30% and turn into a multi-million organization. I have seen an American who took $100 and turned into a multi-million organization. It means leadership is the capacity to translate vision into reality. If we are able to translate what we have in our hand into reality, no matter the little we have in our hand, it will turn to something else. That's why I believe in practical leadership. People should not be given responsibility based on the degree they have. People should not give responsibility based on the qualification they have academically. They should be given responsibility based on their achievements on ground. Let us stop party politics and stop all the votings and look people in the society who have taken 10,000 francs and making into a million organization. Even if he didn't go to school, let us ask him the skill he used to take that little thing. Because in this same country and continent where we are complaining that people are poor or marginalized, imperialists are taking our resources, they are individuals in country. How did Dangote succeed in Nigeria when Britain extracts 65% of his resources? resources. How did Fosso Victor succeed in Cameroon? How did Kaji de Fosso succeed in Cameroon when you say French is taking 70% of our resources? How did this businessman in Gambia, this billionaire in Kenya, became successful in a country you claim the imperialists are extracting the resources? It's a clear indication that if people can survive in that economy who are not at the helm of power.
Apostle Ambe, I don't want to cut you short on that, but among some of the names that you mentioned, I don't want to mention particular names, but there are names there of people that are still being remote controlled in the background by those in power, those businessmen that you mentioned. I don't want to mention particular names, but among the names you mentioned, there are still some of those businessmen that are projected to the forefront by, by people in the background who do not really show up.
Mr. Elvis, if I give you 600 million and I project you from the background, if you are foolish, you are foolish. I give you a biblical scenario. The prodigal son left the father's house with the resources and came back with nothing, while Jacob left the father's house with nothing and came back with a nation. This one has to do with individuals in question. So even if at all the young man who went out left with the backing of his father and the resources, his mindset was poor, because we are given a lot of excuses and opportunity to poor and messing up to keep on messing up. Let me ask you, there are several presidents who have ruled in Kenya. We had the first president, Julio Marimo Kamara Nyerere. You have Benjamin Mokapa. You have this guy before Magufuli came. These are guys, Jakaya Resha Kikwete. They ran Tanzania for many years. The same resources, the same population, the same individuals, the same imperialists were inside that country called Tanzania. And somebody comes and takes the stage of leadership and transforms everything around, because the previous presidents gave us the impression that there was no way you could succeed with the hand of the imperialists on your neck. This guy came within the 5 years and did something outstanding. The days of Stefanos Olympio in Togo, the guy came to power. What did he do? He was the one that refused the franc CFA and decided to introduce the Togo currency. But out of a plot, he was killed and kicked out of power. These are the things we are trying to point out, that it has to do with the individuals in question. As I'm talking to you right now, there is a shortage of fuel in the world. But Paul Kagame in Rwanda, close to your nose, has dropped down the prices of fuel. He made a statement: only idiots give tax breaks to giant mining companies and don't subsidize basic commodities.
Thank you, Apostle Ambe. We'll be coming back to you. Time for us now, ladies and gentlemen, to acknowledge some of our viewers that are already watching, especially those that are watching on Facebook. Wherever you're watching, Facebook, My Media Prime Television, or YouTube, you can watch us on BT Media Group. I want to acknowledge you, Nangasaka Damian, who says he's watching from the international city of Dubai. I want to acknowledge you, Tating Joaquin, watching from Sharjah City. I want to acknowledge you, Smite Bride, watching from Boya. I want to acknowledge Tamunting Robinson Nongo. Greetings to the great minds in the studio. More grace, Mr. Boh. That's your message. Julius Chufo, who says the 30% thing is a consistent view from Apostle Ambe, and I agree with him. We can do more than enough with what we are left with. Then Prirojoy Juava, watching from Chicago, USA, and then Boh Lexus Apostle, our charm encyclopedia, watching from USA. That is Boh Lexus. I move over to you now, Elijah Enoaku, because I want you to talk about our inability to strike deals before coming to comment about being satisfied with the meager 30% peanuts that are being thrown at us Africans. But I want you to begin by talking about how much we lose from our inability to negotiate deals with international with international partners, especially mining deals.
Okay, I'm going to come to that, but I just want to comment on something Dr. Richest said and something Pastor Ambe said, so that we are educating ourselves and educating the society. When it comes to foreign aid, Thomas Sankara says, "He who feeds you controls you." And how did he control this? The problem, one of the problems in Africa, gentlemen, is the fact that we produce raw materials. We sell amount per tonnage. These raw materials are sent out there. They are really they are processed and then sent back to us at almost 20 times the cost of what we produce it for. Then we are being termed at poor people. Look at chocolate that Apostle Boh and Apostle Ambe mentioned, for example. We produce cocoa. These guys take the same cocoa. They buy it for us, I think, 1,000 francs per ton. They take it over there, they transform the cocoa into chocolate, bring it back to Cameroon. If you compare the cost, if you were to take that chocolate that we eat, compare the cost of how much is being sold to us, you see that it's almost 20 times what they buy the cocoa from us after transportation. So that is one of the problems that this man called Thomas Sankara fought. And within a space of 4 years, that man transformed the farmland of Burkina Faso from producing about 800 kilograms, 800 tons per year to 13,000 tons per hectare. That's to tell us that that's a president and a man with vision for his country. Now, coming back to the question that you asked me, when it comes to negotiating deals, I do not know how African countries negotiate their deals. Contemporary example will give us an example of what we are talking about. In Tanzania, that all of us know, and then of course Ambe alluded to it, there was a deal between a Chinese company and the former government before Magufuli, and this deal says that they were going to construct a port that was going to be like one of the best ports in Africa. And the deal the Chinese company signed with the former government said that they were going to control that port for 99 years and go into investment with any other person they want without the control of the government. The government was hands off. Who signs that kind of a deal that a country will come and construct a port in your country and control it for 99 years without you getting $1 from there? Look at the deal that has been signed in Cameroon with the iron company of China. We have a deal that has been signed, and this deal says that they're going to transform iron pellets and clean it and take it back to China and transform that iron pellet into steel, and they're going to sell that steel back to us. Meanwhile, if we have that iron pellets, we transform it into, number one, we're going to create a blast furnace. Number two, we're going to create a pickling line. Number three, we're going to create steel making. Number three, we're going to create electricity. And these are the kind of things that Africa keeps going in every single day. Who makes the deals in Africa? It blows my mind. Look at Uganda, for example. Uganda went to a deal with the Exim Bank of China, and they said they were going to construct an airport for Uganda. When this airport was constructed, the terms of the deal said that if you fail for any reason to pay this amount of money within this certain time, the airport will be taken over. As we were talking a couple of months ago, there was negotiation between Exim Bank of China to take over the airport, the main airport of Uganda that they have. Who negotiates this kind of deals for Africa? Who goes into this kind of deal and say that your own national treasure will be taken over if for any reason you fail to pay your bills? So these are some of the things that Africa is going through. And if, as we've been saying, all of us, if we have a president, people in leadership that have the mindset to change these things, it's going to happen. Africa is going to develop.
Thank you.
Because, number one, let me just finish this point before you go there. The reason some of these deals are being done the way they are done is because of lack of the rule of law. Because these deals are done like this because there are people, corrupt people behind, who go behind and cut these deals because they have their personal interest. The same Magufuli that we talked about, you realize that individuals in Tanzania were cutting a deal with Petra Diamond Company and were getting close to 10% from those private companies and put into their pocket. When he retracted this money, we know that he recovered $200 million within 5 months from those companies. Can you imagine how Africa is losing? So there is something going on which we call the rule of law, which Africa lacks, in addition to corrupt, inefficient who do not have the mind of people ahead.
Thank you, Elijah Enoaku. Just to indicate that according to statistics, as of 2019, Nigeria produced most of Africa's petroleum. That was 25%. Angola produced 12%, and then Nigeria came third, Algeria, with 16% of Africa's petroleum. Of course, I want to ask this question to Dr. Richard Munang, because we are getting information coming in from Nigeria. You can get to the website, thenationonline.net, which is indicating that a presidential aspirant of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, Mr. Peter Obi, has said that no single dollar had been paid into the federal government's account since January, despite the rise in crude oil price at the international market. Now you see an opportunity for Africa, Dr. Richard Munang, due to a rise in crude oil prices at the international market, an opportunity for the entire continent to benefit from. But in Nigeria, we don't know what has happened. No single franc has been paid into the federal government's account since January, according to presidential aspirant Peter Obi. What can be the cause of this?
Yeah, thanks again, Mr. Boh. Before I answer the question, let me just put this in perspective, because I think if we jump straight to talk about symptoms without necessarily actually getting to the underpinning of where the rain started beating us, we might not be able to provide practical solutions that can solve this. The first is that if you look at minerals in the continent, they do not contribute the bulk of the GDP. The agricultural sector in the continent contributes over 60% of the GDP in the continent and employs over 65% of the entire workforce. When you look at the mineral sectors, if you take Cameroon, for example, it only contributes 3.2% to the GDP. Over 34 to 37% of the GDP of Cameroon comes from the agro sector. Now, when it comes now to the question that you have asked, the reality is that, first of all, the petroleum products that are actually produced by Africa are not added value by Africans. If you look, when oil is discovered in the continent, petroleum is discovered, there is always that glamour and cheers of excitement by citizens thinking that that is automatically going to be turned into money. And as Mr. Elijah said, first of all, when you look at what is happening, the minerals and the petroleums and gas, actually, when it is tapped, it is processed elsewhere and then sold back to the continent at a very high price. So if Africa was adding value and processing these petroleum products, into gas finished products, of course, this will be marketed, and the high appetite that is needed at the moment will actually be traded across the entire African continent. So the point I'm trying to drive here is that if you think that you are going to make sure that your economy grows by focusing only on these mineral resources, you are going to run out at some point, because that is not sustainable and it also employs very few people. Diversification is the biggest security of a system. And the best way to diversify is to start adding value to this raw material, but at the same time also investing the proceeds in the agro sector, so that people can then be able to afford some of these goods without necessarily having to depend whether the country is rich in in mineral resources or not. Just to touch on this point that Elijah touched on, I think, and Apostle Ambe also touched on. Regardless of an excellent leader, and I mean, this is reality. Of course, leaders provide vision, and visions go beyond slogans. Visions are not slogans. Visions are actually an imagination. No matter how excellent a leader is, if the quality of the citizens and don't have the right attitude for work, no matter what you do, nothing will actually change. What am I trying to say here? We cannot discuss this issue missing the aspect of software, as I call it. How people's attitudes can actually be engineered to start now doing what they need to do, not only talking about blame game and accusing others on how they're supposed to do it. The quality of the African citizenry today needs a revamping. The software needs to be gotten right. The attitude to work, the attitude to become passionate, the attitude to know that at least we must work with what we have to get what we don't have. Unless we start moving in this direction, regardless of whether the mineral resources in the continent are actually sold within the continent, are actually done in a way that excellent deals are negotiated, which they should be, we might still not address the poverty challenges and the unemployment challenges we face. So we need a reimagination. And that reimagination needs to start thinking, how do we refinance our development using our local structures that are accessible to those who are in the community? Because I was speaking today, 80% of the jobs created in Africa are created by the informal sector. These are our mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters in the communities, in villages. And the financial gap that can be tapped from where they are is $300 billion US. But it's not currently being tapped today. Nobody talks about leveraging on cooperatives, which actually they contribute up to 55% of the GDP of the entire African continent. We then now go depend on aid. And actually, as we're speaking today, an analysis done by the United Nations Economic Commission shows that over 20 African countries have economic distress today. Taking loans, not investing those loans in areas that are catalytic to bring high returns on investment, taking loans and focusing in areas, yes, we need infrastructure, but infrastructure for what? Infrastructure should be connecting farms to market so that mothers who produce their food can have access to market. Infrastructure to add value to agricultural produce. So the point I'm making is that if we do not reimagine our economic development within leadership that is not only about those who are at the top, but about every citizen, then we might continuously face these calamities and especially these kind of emergencies that we are facing today with fuel, with food, and Africa will continue to be impoverished.
Thank you, Dr. Richard Munang. Thank you, Elijah. We'll be coming back to you. It's time for Apostle Ambe to speak now. Just to say, ladies and gentlemen, that Dr. Richard Munang, who is a policy development expert, Elijah Enoaku, who is a senior international researcher on African development. These are people who are highly consulted all over the world. You might get them speak here for free, but normally they don't speak for free. These are people who are consulted by governments, as well as Apostle Ambe Valentine here, consulted even by international organizations and even European governments. They consult Apostle Ambe Valentine on development issues. So it's quite a privilege for them to come and talk in this show. And when they talk, it is because they love Africa and they want our leaders in place to listen to the points that are raised and see how they can use these points to ameliorate leadership in their respective countries. Apostle Ambe, I know you would like to react on this. A presidential aspirant, Peter Obi, saying that since January, meaning for close to 5 months now, the federal government has not received even a franc in their account of proceeds from crude oil, despite an increase in the price of crude oil in the international market. And now we have a leader. Can we say such a country where for close to 5 months, proceeds from crude oil sales have not been sent into the federal account, and yet the leader is quiet? Can we say such a country has a leader? I'm talking about Nigeria in this case.
Yes, Mr. Elvis, you see, we still rotate on the same spot and keep saying the same things. We have egoistic, self-centered, wicked leaders in Africa. Someone's interest is more important than the interest of an entire community. Someone's pride is more important than the well-being of 170-something million people. I don't know when they amass this wealth, what they do with it. We hear of individuals and African presidents who die leaving trillions of dollars in accounts, foreign accounts, where there is a child somewhere who doesn't have money to pay school fees. There are people in hospitals who don't have money to get drugs. There are individuals who sleep in the street, and there are others who cannot go to school because their parents don't have money for school fee. But there are individuals with huge amount of money in banks littered across the globe because the self-centeredness, the greed, and the wickedness of leaders and their leadership is what is affecting this continent, Africa. The idea of thinking that colonialism, imperialism, and the rest put together is our trouble is a very big lie. It's a big lie. Do you know this guy they call first president of Malawi, Hastings Kamuzu Banda? Hastings Kamuzu Banda died leaving about $300 million to his personal account when there were Malawians in the street who could not have a shelter over their head. If they give you the account of some of these African presidents who are of late, Sani Abacha in Nigeria died. The amount of money that was in his reserve was beyond the money of the Nigerian government. An individual, you are hearing in Nigeria that for a complete year, the strength of the nation, that is oil, none of that particular resource has brought income to the state federal account. It tells you that that money is in the hand of individuals. Do you know how many children, how many women, how many children, how many men were supposed to have been fed with that amount of money that have been swindled and siphoned into some people's personal account. We are in Africa. We are calling European demons. We are calling the European wicked people. The real demons live within us, the continent Africa. That is the truth. I hear sometimes we say the white man came here. Not every white came to Africa. If we are talking about colonialism in Africa, we're talking about Belgians who colonized Burundi and colonized Rwanda and colonized Congo. We are talking about Britain that colonized Nigeria and took about the East African territories of German East African territories. We are talking of France that took some African countries. Not every European country came to Africa. Russia did not come to Africa to colonize. We're talking about Portugal that took away Angola, took away Guinea-Bissau, and took away Cape Verde, Mozambique. We are talking about countries like Croatia. They never came here. Countries like Hungary never came here. Countries like Austria did not come here. How did those countries develop without extracting the resources of Africa? We are talking about Latvia, Bosnia-Herzegovina. We are talking about countries like Lithuania that break off from the USSR. We are talking about Canada that never came here. How did those countries without extracting African resources grow up? Which of those countries could be compared to any of the resources we have in Africa here? Every country has played to their strength. Croatia is a little country in the middle of Europe that depends solely on water. Singapore never came here. Under Lee Jiang-hu, their leader, they took that country from scratch because Singapore was a country that broke out from the Malaysian Federation. From nothing, it is a port area. They took just a single port and transformed into something else. We are talking about colonization. Was Latin America not colonized by Spain? Was India not colonized by Britain? When we keep talking about bad leadership in Africa, people think that we are just here to heap coals of fire upon the head of leaders. A state where income does not go into the state coffers, it enters into individuals' pocket. It tells you, you come to our very Cameroon here, money given to construct a stadium went into the account of families. When we have almost about 26 million people in this country who are still looking for means of livelihood, yet individuals are swindling account and feed a whole community. Congo Democratic is mentioned among the 10 poorest countries in Africa. The first is Burundi, second is Somalia, before you have Mali, before you come down to Congo Democratic. But the richest country in terms of resources is Congo Democratic. Why? Joseph Desire Mobutu Seko Kukubendu Wazabanga was the leader of that country. Have you seen where he lived? It's now in shambles. That is to let you understand that the greed of African leaders is the undoing of Africans. And until we accept this stark reality, we will keep jumping and ping-ponging from one state to another. A simple example of few African countries, leaders who have made a difference. Elijah mentioned of Thomas Sankara. I cannot go into those details. Paul Kagame is a living testimony. Magufuli is a living testimony. The president of Mauritius Island is a living testimony. Botswana has broken the record against corruption. Mauritius equally has broken that record. You go to Botswana, they are okay. You go to Mauritius, they are okay. Did those presidents from those countries fall from space? I'm asking these questions because it looks like we were the only people who were colonized and we were the people who had nothing to offer. As a matter of fact, until we get to deal with the human resource in this continent, Africa, we will keep sitting on billions of natural resources when there are no mines to transform it. I end with this. Jeremiah 3, God says, if I want to povertize a city, I don't take away material resources, I take away human resources. So poverty is the absence of human resource, not material resource.
Thank you, Apostle Ambe. We hope that the leaders are watching, because most of the time we see them watching and drinking wine while watching, and they'll be able to implement some of the things they get from this program and put them into action for the betterment of our continent. Let's get this message from Marshal Esolimoto End Times. What a name. Based on the topic today, the colonial masters are to be blamed to a larger extent because they depended most on Africa's raw materials, and they do this by implanting some gullible leaders who dance according to their rhythm and maintain them in power for a long time. Elijah, do you share the viewpoint of Marshal Osolimoto End Times?
Absolutely not. I do not share that view. Absolutely not. You tell me, Rwanda still had colonial masters. What did they do? When Paul Kagame came to power, he realized that France was a problem. What did he do? He kicked out France and instituted English. He realized that the country is going to run on energy. What did he do? That guy instituted a massive energy policy that went from the country was producing, I think, 2010 megawatts of energy. Today, Rwanda is producing 98.77 megawatts of energy. And there are so many Africans that are trooping to Rwanda to go and look for jobs. If a leader creates the environment, that goes back to the point that Dr. Richard was making, that I want to emphasize on it. If a leader creates the enabling environment for development to happen, it will happen. If the leader creates the enabling environment for agriculture to happen, it will happen. The people. I'm talking about Paul Kagame. When he took over power, that was one of the laziest countries in the world. The people did not want to work. They were just relying on their cattle and everything. But today, as we are speaking in Rwanda, if you get up from bed, you don't go to work, you're going to have the police come to your house and ask why you're going to work. If you do not pay your taxes, in short, they have a tax system that is electronic. You don't go to go and pay taxes somewhere. You just press a button. I'm talking about a country in Africa. Press a button, you pay through electronic means. That is what we are talking about. Those colonialists, whatever they did, we cannot sit here today and be complaining about colonialists. They are not the one. In Tanzania, when Magufuli came to power, he realized that there were so many ghost workers that were duping the economy, duping the country. He organized an audit, and more than 20,000 ghost workers were fired. That is a leader that has the vision of the people at heart. He realized that the companies that were producing gold, it's true that they are colonial powers, but he had to audit them. When he audited them, he realized, for example, Petra Diamond was stealing more than 30% of the country's resources. What did he do? He put a penalty and said, you either pay this amount of money or you leave. The countries know that they were tapping resources from there. What did they do? They had to pay 30% of their revenue for that year into the government coffers. And not only that, the country of Tanzania had 3% stake in all mining in that country right now. And that is what we are talking about. How many years did it take for him to do that? 5 years. It was not 20 years, 5 years for this guy to make that change. So what we are saying is that if Africa has the right leadership, forget about colonization, forget about whatsoever, they will institute policies that are going to benefit the people. As we are speaking today, countries in Africa are busy fighting war. For those who are from Cameroon, how much does your country spend on fighting war every single day? In your country, money that should have been invested in the economy to solve the problem. But what was happening in Rwanda at that time, this guy came to power. Ladies and gentlemen, I need to say this so that we understand what is ailing Africa. When Kagame came to power, he realized that if he allowed the Tutsi and the Hutu continue to, bring all this hate speech, something was going to happen. And if he continued to keep all those people who perpetrated genocide in jail, there was going to be no peace. This guy organized a peace and reconciliation where all the perpetrators of genocide and all those victims came together into a peaceful reconciliation. Today, you have genocide perpetrators and victims working hand in hand because he saw that without that, there's still going to be strife in the country. But today, in your own country, if you're Cameroonian, what do you see? Billions upon billions are being used to fight a war that people could sit around the table and resolve that issue, and a peaceful country exists for everybody to progress. Those are some of the problems that are ailing Africa today. It is not the colonial powers that are coming there to tie their hands. If they come there, who do they negotiate those deals with? They negotiate with Africans. And Africans that negotiate those deals are the ones that are destroying the country. So forget about colonialization, forget about whatsoever, forget about all this victimhood mentality and say colonial powers are the one putting us down. The problem of Africa is Africans themselves, not colonial power. Yes, we do know. You talk about Nigeria, for example. How will a country for more than how many years have not had a single naira deposited into the state coffers with all this high rise in export? And then nothing is being done. And I tell you, if you are to look at the definition of failed states, there are so many countries in Africa that are failed states, that somebody is in charge of a petroleum organization and there is no money that's coming from there into the coffers of the country and nothing is being done to him. Who is the Minister of Petroleum in that country? What's being done to him? Look at the country of Cameroon, for example. We hear about all this embezzling going on and on. Oh yes, people are going to be arrested. After they're being arrested, what happens to the money that they had? We don't hear anything about it. That is the problem we have in Africa. Leadership that is working for their stomach. They have no vision. They cannot inspire the young population. Even the farmers, like Dr. Richard talked about. Who's inspiring the farmers to do agriculture? Where are the resources? We're talking about the 1984 agri-education. They bought trailers and tractors. Today, we see those tractors are in the bush, somewhere in the south. I don't remember. But what happened to it? Because we don't have the leadership that is able to motivate the people, provide the enabling environment for people to excel. If the head is sick, the rest of the body is going to be sick. That's the truth, Dr. Richard.
Okay, thank you, Elijah Nwaku. Let's move over now to Dr. Richard Munang. Dr. Richard, we cannot underestimate, for instance, the role some foreign nations like France play in the politics of Africa. Of course, with accusations, especially from countries that were colonized by France. We've heard of accusations related to control over the natural resources of former French Africa colonies, control of their foreign reserves, they control our own currency, they control the monetary policy. And one of the countries that does that is France. Can we say some of these points? Can we say some of these points do not contribute to the poor development in the country? Because from what Elijah Nwaku seems to say, I mean, we might go home with the impression that these guys have not done anything wrong for Africa.
I mean, let's put facts together. Across the entire world, only 11 countries were not colonized. Let me repeat it again. Across the entire world, only 11 countries were not colonized. Is Africa state today with 54 countries as a result of only colonization? Of course, there are issues that you can touch a bit and link to colonization. The United States was colonized by Britain. Canada was colonized by Britain. India was colonized. China was colonized by Japan. Why are those countries today not the same like Africa? So, in as much as there is a link to colonization, it cannot be the sole reason why we are where we are today. The reason why we are where we are today is that we do not understand exactly what we want as a country. And it's a fact. I mean, some people might not like it, but let's be truthful sometimes to the reality so that we can be able to address the issues. If you do not know your interests, you will definitely never be able to succeed in the global space. It's about interest, and that is why you will see every country in the world have an ambassador representing the interests of that country. If you are an ambassador of the United States in Cameroon, represent the interests of the United States. The ambassador of Cameroon in the United States represents the interests of the United States. And what are these interests? They are economic, social, environmental, political interests that should then be able to favor the country. What am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say is that if we pin everything only to the colonial master, that song we are going to sing till Jesus Christ comes back to this earth. Why? The global architecture is such that it is about interests. It is about how you negotiate to get the best value when you sit on the table. And that takes me to the point of what I mentioned. We have been prided as resilient people in the continent that we survive colonization, that we survive diseases and we survive malaria, we are resilient. Yes, we are. But resilience is not what matters in this global space today. What matters is value. And value is created. Value is about being strategic. Value is about organizing your people so they can be able to co-create solutions to the challenges you face so that you can use the outcomes of those challenges that have been turned to products to market. When you don't have anything to offer, you will be used. Where did it stop Africans because of colonial masters? Which of them, either it was Britain or France or Japan that colonized China, Has China ever sat anywhere and been complaining that, oh, because we're colonized by Japan, then we're going to follow our own way and drive our own development in our own culture? Where did it stop Africans to say, okay, we are going to build the skills of our people and make sure that since we have 365 days of sunshine, we're going to tap the sun and add value to our agricultural produce and tap into the agro market that exists in the continent that is worth 150 billion US dollars. Which colonial master told African countries to import food worth 48 billion US dollars each and every year, and as they're importing that food that is worth between 35 billion to 48 billion, they are using food in the continent every year worth 48 billion US dollars as their citizens go to bed hungry. What is missing in Africa is lack of reimagination. If you do not reimagine using what you have today into the future, you might not have solutions. And what will happen is that people will tap into your gap, into the weaknesses that you project, and then capitalize on it because the world is about interest. So the point is, if we do not realize that we have to offer value, and offering value is not about slogans, and I keep saying this, it's about getting your people to work, inspiring them, creating the enabling environment, creating policies that are responsive to the real needs of the people so you can incentivize them to tap into opportunities in an enterprising dimension so they can create wealth and put in their pocket, and of course pay taxes that can be used to build roads, can be used to put the requisite infrastructure. That's how you develop a country. When you start to do that, foreign partners will engage with you from a position of strength, and you will negotiate from a position of strength, and you will drive transformation. Why I brought up this dimension is that Africa is not an island. And sometimes if you do not recognize that we are part of the global system, it is quite very, very sensitive. We might end up losing reality and fail to reimagine the future, which would be very, very disastrous for the continent.
Dr. Richard Munang, you're not going away, because after this we are going to get into the solution-oriented approach. Of course, it's important to come and talk about who is to be blamed, but of course, how can we solve this? And it is left to public authorities to listen to these free solutions provided by our consultants who normally are paid at the international scene to be able to provide these solutions, and they're highly paid in millions of US dollars by other countries to be able to provide such solutions. But because of the love they have for the continent, they decide to give these lessons free of charge to our leaders here in Africa. So you are not going away. I want to ask you this question before we come to Apostle Ambe for him to start giving us the solutions so far. I know that I invited you today as the policy, development policy expert, but of course, do not forget that Dr. Richard Munang is the African Regional Climate Change Coordinator at the United Nations Environment. I think let's see. Yes, acting African Regional Climate Change Coordinator at the United Nations Development Program. So can we say, Dr. Richard Munang, that are we going to lose some resources in the continent as a result of climate change? I want you to talk about that before we get to the solutions, with beginning with Apostle Ambe, because you are an environment scientist, and of course you master these issues related to climate change. Are there some resources that we might lose in Africa if we don't pay particular attention to climate change, for instance?
Actually, Africa is already losing its GDP as we speak today. If you take Cameroon, Cameroon is losing its GDP 5%, and in the next 10 years, Cameroon will lose up to 50% of its GDP. But this is a continent, let me put it in perspective, that has contributed just 2 to 3% of the emissions that are actually suffering one of the worst impacts of climate. We're talking now, there are droughts in East Africa here as we speak that are actually affecting over 25 million people. We're talking, there are floods that have plunged southern African regions, and we are seeing droughts in the Sahel. So these are actually contributing to the economic stress, because when you grow your food and you are unable to harvest, you can't feed your family. When the source of livelihood is depreciated, then that continuously plunges millions of people into suffering. So, but this is the point here. Climate change is a disguised opportunity. We are now talking at a time whereby the African continent have actually ratified what is called the Paris Change Agreement, which is pretty much agreement for countries to lower emissions, and countries develop simple plan to ensure that the agricultural systems are transformed, to ensure that energy can reach millions of people across the continent. We have 620 million citizens who are energy impoverished. But Africa has 365 days of sunshine. That then means there is no justification for any citizen in Africa not to have access to electricity. And this electricity, to be able to reach mothers in community, needs to be what we call off-grid, which means we need to now start using what is called solar energy. But to use solar energy, we also need to ensure that at least we have the enabling policies in place. And most African countries are putting these enabling policies in place. So we need to appreciate and applaud progress where there is progress. Africa is a leader when it comes to policies. But we need to graduate from being excellent in policy to now become excellent in implementation. Because the biggest gap that continuously perpetuates the poverty in Africa is that better policies are not translated to real impact on the ground by implementation. This is where we need citizens to engage, because citizens are the constituents of implementation, but the rule of government is to create an enabling policy. And sometimes when you hear that government should do this, do that, I actually cringe, because government rule is not necessarily implementation, but creating enabling environment, and the citizens have to tap those incentives to implement in such a way that they can create opportunities for themselves. And therefore, with the changing climate today, countries are putting enabling environment. Cameroon actually submitted what is called revised indices, and then Cameroon is a leader when it comes to the climate change policy space. That's true. Let's give credit where it's due. Nigeria, Kenya, Zambia, South Africa, all African countries are leaders. But where there's a problem is implementation of the and the solution to implement this is to incentivize the youthful population, because you can only put work when you have yet. So they say Africa's youth are Africa's climate army, but they don't care about climate change as an issue. They will seize the opportunities from the perspective of how to create wealth and actually create jobs. And what does government need to do? Incentivize them. Start using money for poverty reduction, channel this through cooperatives so that young people, even at the local community, can be able to access cooperatives in those communities and use that money to be able to tap into just turning simple agricultural waste into fuel briquettes that replace charcoal. If I take Cameroon, for example, 7,000 Cameroonians die every year as a result of indoor pollution. If we were to compare this with COVID, about 3,000 to 4,000 people died of COVID. But 7,000 every year die in Cameroon. Across Africa, 700,000 Africans die because of indoor pollution. But what's the solution? Simple. Incentivize young people. Give resources so that at least they can be trained and start turning agricultural waste to fuel briquettes to replace the charcoal that is killing Africans. That will tap into an economy of 20 billion. And the last part of climate change is that Africa's transformation will not happen without using climate change as a development solution. And unless we do that, we will continuously build infrastructure, but will be flooded. We will build houses, but those houses will be flooded. We will invest with borrowed money, but we will not be able to get returns. Okay. And therefore, climate transformation needs to become part and parcel of transformational development.
Thank you. We use the remaining 20 minutes to talk about the solutions. Thank you, Dr. Richard Munang. As I said, he is the African Regional Climate Change Coordinator at the UN Environment Program. I was struggling to get the word when I was asking the question the last time at the UN Environment Program. But today he's not intervening in the show in that position. He's intervening today because he's also a policy development expert. Of course, we'll have an occasion to talk about climate change with him and another panel of climate change experts to talk about climate change in Africa and how it affects our continent, because that is a topic that is most of the time ignored by the media. Apostle Ambe Valentine, you are I would say you are the number 9 share of the show as you are sitting there with me in the studio. Apostle Ambe, want to begin from you to talk about solutions. We've talked a lot about who is to be blamed and so on and so forth, but I think our leaders that are watching this program like to know more about solutions. What can be done to ensure that resources of our continent, the trillion upon trillion of dollars, because as Elijah told me, trillion dollars worth of resources was about 1972, and then as the years unfold, the number of resources increase. So it is trillion upon trillion of dollars worth of resources. What can we do for these resources to be equitably distributed and well managed in a manner that they'll be beneficial to the entire continent?
Yes, I think the first thing we have to do is to play to your strength. Every continent, every country, every environment has its uniqueness. If you look at the continent Africa effectively or look it very well, you will discover that first and foremost in the continent Africa, one of the things that thrives and makes us distinguish from every other continent is the climatic condition and the soil that God has given to us. Africa is good in agriculture. As a matter of fact, if you want to take the demography of Nigeria, there are particular places where they have unique, particular physical features and qualities, and the entire state depends on those particular states for those things. For instance, Benue State is known as the breadbasket of Nigeria, so everybody looks up to Benue State for food. From the north to the east, the south, and the west, they look up to Benue State because it's a breadbasket. Now let's go around to the continents of the world: Asia, North America, South America, Europe, Africa. What can be derived from Africa? Africa should be the breadbasket of the world. As a matter of fact, we are supposed to be feeding the rest of the world, but that is not the case. Do you know that in Cameroon alone we import 42.5 billion worth of pork per annum? In this Cameroon, why should we be importing pork from Europe? That is to let you understand that we do not even know where our strength is. When we keep focusing on mineral resources, the president of African Development Bank, Akinwumi Adesina, said they are looking for at least $10 billion to put into agriculture in Africa this year. Every nation must, or every country must have its strength. Look at what is happening in America. America is known for technology. America doesn't feed the world. You go to Russia, Russia is in charge of ammunitions. That is where they get their strength from. You go to Europe, Europe has its own uniqueness. Africa definitely has its strength, and that strength is that Africa has the capacity to feed the whole world. As a matter of fact, when Africa closes its food doors, then the whole world should go hungry. But it's so shocking that in a moment like this, when Ukraine and Russia are having crisis, yet we have shortage of flour. It means the whole world depends on Russia and Ukraine for wheat. That's an error, of which the whole world is supposed to depend on Africa for food. If there is a continent, if they get angry, nobody should eat, it should be Africa. And because we are not playing to our strength, we are focusing, almost every country in Africa is running towards petrol. You cannot see young men involved in agriculture. Everyone wants to study petrochemical engineering to go to a petroleum industry. How much petrol does Africa have? We're not focusing on that. You go to other countries of the world, they have that uniqueness. You go to India, India is coming up in the IT. India is coming up in medicine. So distinguished in that area. It's so bad that if you hear somebody has kidney problem, cancer, the first thing they start thinking is to fly to India. That is India's strength. We're talking about technology, go to America. You talk about production of arms, go to Russia. What is Africa unique about? We must start playing to our strength. That's the beginning. Number two, we must protect the unique leaders that God sent to us. Nobody has ever killed the ones that God has raised to us than Africans. Thomas Isidore Noel Sankara was killed by a Burkinabe. Magufuli, I'm 100% convinced, was killed by Tanzanians. Paul Kagame has risen in Rwanda. He's rising. The issue is we do not even know how to protect our own. The bad thing is that we have a group of military people in this continent, Africa, who claim to pretend as if the evil happening in this continent does not reach them. It sometimes surprises me to see how military men are protecting people who are putting their family members and their extended family members under severe financial torture. Why should you protect people who cannot develop the continent? You can't find leaders who are ineffective in nations or continents like America and Europe and still stay in power. They will chase you away. They will chase you away out of power. Because why? You are jeopardizing the life of millions of people. It's only in Africa that people are in deep failure. We are still protecting them. It's delicate. That's why I say that we must play to our strength. Secondly, we must be able to protect the leaders that are doing the job. Thirdly, I may end here because if you want to do it's going to be a lecture class.
Of course.
Thirdly, yes. Thirdly, Africa should fight to have its own currency. He that prints your money determines what you spend. We have different currencies in Africa. Imagine the whole of Europe has one currency. The whole of India has one currency. The whole of China has one currency. The whole of America has one currency. You come to Africa, by the time you leave Kenya and you jump to Cameroon, you are in CFA. You leave Cameroon, you go to Botswana, you are in Escudo. You leave Botswana, you go to Egypt, you are in pounds. You jump from Egypt, you come to Zambia, you are in kwacha. You leave from Zambia, you go to Cote d'Ivoire, you are in francs. You leave Cote d'Ivoire, you come to Nigeria, you are in naira. You leave Nigeria, you go to Liberia, you are in dollars. In a single continent, there are about 54 different kinds of currency. What is the worth of each of those currencies in the world market?
Thank you.
That should be the question.
Thank you, Apostle Ambe. Let's now move over to Elijah and Dr. Richard Munang for them to give their solutions. I think we're going to give them 3 minutes or 3.5 minutes each for them to give their solutions, because we are gradually getting to the end of the program. But before that, I will first of all like Dr. Richard Munang and Elijah to talk about this. Dr. Wesley Angoni has sent in some questions. He says, African countries should not be put into one basket. I'm wondering if my African brothers and sisters are aware of the magnitude of France-Afrique in a country like Cameroon that makes prices for your natural resources in the world market, who controls your foreign reserves, who owns your currency. Their French central bank has total control over your monetary policies. How can a country function without a central bank? How can a country function when they can't even print coins if there is a shortage? How can a government function without the power to control the interest rates of our current currency to fight inflation? Tell me, guys, is this country sovereign? This is Dr. Angoni Wesley. Wanted to get a perspective of Elijah and Dr. Richard on these issues before you guys can talk about your solutions towards the problems that has been raised today. We begin with you, Elijah.
Okay. To answer my friend Wesley, first and foremost, the Central African region has a central bank called the BIAP. But I do agree with him that the monetary policy within the Central African region are controlled by France, because our reserves are stored in the French central bank. I'm one of the proponents of the fact that that should be scrapped. It is horrendous that a bunch of countries will have their currency tied to the reserve of a different country, and which are exposed to the whims and caprices and monetary and interest rate manipulation by that other country. It is absurd. So yes, he and I will agree on that there is no way that these countries should continue to have their reserves stored in the French central bank. That's horrendous. That should, I mean, there's a lot of young people that have been agitating for that. I hope the African countries that are in that domain are going to listen to this. Now, on the second aspect of the African economy that he talked, it's very true. Every country is different. And I want to use what my friend Wesley said and also what Dr. Richard said to make a point here. Every country is unique. In Africa, there are some countries that have different resources that should focus on than the other. In one country, it's agriculture. In another country, it could be natural resources. In another country, it could be energy. In another country, it could be one thing or the other. So yes, in Africa, we have different kind of resources, but every country should identify where they are going to make the most gain. That is what Paul Kagame did. I keep referring to Paul Kagame because I've done a lot of studies with that country. They have done a magnificent job. And I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, what does that country have as resources? Nothing. Nothing. But that is becoming a reference to Africa today because they identify what is their strength. What do they need? They realize that their country needs to run on energy. So he focused first on energy, produce the energy so that when foreign countries are coming, they're not going to complain of lack of electricity. And when they're coming now, they have the electricity to run their power. Then secondly, he's focused on the rule of law. African countries need to focus on the rule of law. Here in Canada, where I live, a lady was almost sent to jail. A government official was almost sent to jail because she embezzled $500. Imagine that, $500. She almost sent to jail. But in Africa and in African countries, just like you just mentioned there, Nigeria, that somebody is the head of the petroleum company, consortium, and there is no naira that is going to government coffers, and nothing has been done. It's unfortunate that the Buhari of 1984, who was a military man, is better than the Buhari of today, who is a civilian. So do we now say that Africa should be ruled by military leaders? That's a different thing altogether. So number one for me is the rule of law. A lot of African countries today qualify for failed states. I'm telling you, if you look at the definition of failed states, there is no rule of law. Anybody does anything and goes free. That is why when Magufuli came to power, the first thing he instituted is the rule of law. You have to earn your gains, your benefits, and everything you work for, you have to earn it. Number two, Africa needs to diversify. It's true, just like Dr. Rita said, that we do have all these resources, but we need to diversify. We have rubber, we have Arabica, we have cotton, we have agriculture. All these need to be tapped together so that we are not relying on one particular thing in order to boost that economy. Now, coming to revenue collection, I want to mention something to this because there was an example that I was reading. I'm not saying that country should emulate it. Uganda, I think that was 1990, realized that they were losing more than 80% of their revenue collection to tax fraud. So the country decided to do something. They said they were going to use born agains. This is funny. I know people who are not religious, they're going to come against it and say this, but that's not the point I'm trying to make. They were looking for honest people. So they decided to recruit a group of these people from these churches and pay them and said they were going to increase their salary and said they should be honest. Uganda went from 20% of revenue from taxes to 80%. If you know the amount of revenue that African countries is losing in terms of tax fraud, you will be amazed. Number three, offshore accounts. Ladies and gentlemen, all the corrupt people in Africa, they have created offshore accounts in such a way that they are being given shares. So the money that they're stealing right now is not more fiscal money. You are giving shares in offshore companies, and those shares are money that you can collect when you retire. African countries should go after all those oligarchs that are stealing government money and storing it abroad. Number five, use your local resources. For those who are listening from Cameroon, when we were growing up, we heard about the main fall. That is a fall that can generate the whole of West Africa and give them electricity. But today, because of politics or whatever, nothing is being done on that country. We have all it takes to develop the economies of Africa, either for politics or tribalism or one other thing or the other. We are not utilizing that. Number five, protect the local industries. There is a lot of dump that is happening in Africa. The local industries cannot compete with foreign dumps. I will give an example. If you take companies that are producing mosquito nets in Africa, for example, all what Africa needs can be produced in Africa. Then you take foreign countries that are going to produce that at a cheap rate and come and dump it in Africa. How do you expect the local industries to compete with the foreign industries? So Africa should protect its own as well. You take, Pastor Ambe mentioned about flour. We can produce flour in Cameroon. We can produce flour in Nigeria. We can produce all those things in Africa. But when you take now foreign industries that are dumping all those goods in Africa, the local industries die automatically because cost of production is very high, they cannot compete. So there are steps that African countries need to put in place to really grow. But number one, as all of us have all said, the leadership of Africa needs to be the one that encourages this atmosphere. For those of you who are from Cameroon, you can see an example. You have a young man there called Samuel Eto'o who has just taken over the helm of the football federation. You see what's happening. That's an example of leadership that have the people at heart want to fix things, want to make things fun. Without this, Africa will continue to wallow in a lot of trouble.
Thank you, Elijah. Let's get to Dr. Richard Munang to get his own views about solutions, his approach towards a solution for Africa to be able to equitably distribute its wealth and make good use of its resources. Dr. Richard Munang.
Yeah, thanks again, and thanks to Apostle Ambe and Elijah. I think they have given a very salient point. I will build on that. The first point is that you do not fight existing realities, and I think this is something Africans everywhere should learn. What you do is you develop models, innovative models that make existing realities obsolete, because fighting the existing realities will not be with the same approaches, with the same mentality, and expecting that there will be different results. No, it doesn't work that way in Nobel. You cannot be able to rear crocodiles when you don't have a pond. That's where Africa is today. We try to do what we are not good at, and what we are good at, we abandon. And I think the panelists have alluded to this. We import food when we are actually supposed to be the bread basket for the world. And then we export employment, like Elijah said. Those of us who took tea or coffee this morning or afternoon, wherever we are, that coffee is produced in the continent, but it is packaged and processed somewhere and then exported to the continent here. So that's a misnomer. The first point is we must be able to develop models, because I'm trying to say that to allude to the fact that, of course, every country should have its own central bank. Of course, Africa should have its own African Central Bank, which is currently a discussion with the African Union Agenda 2063. But those countries that have their own central bank, are they really where they're supposed to be? There is something still missing. Of course, there needs to be a central bank of every country, but let's not just say that we need a central bank. If we get it, that's fine. But we need to look beyond that and say, why can't we work with what we have as we aim to get the best of what it's supposed to be? The other aspect is, we are focused in the continent with distributive economy. Distributive economy cannot grow Africa because it will always leave many at the bottom of the pyramid. We must focus on productive economies. And what is the simplicity of what I'm saying here? Empower our youth so they can be able to start turning challenges to opportunities in the areas in which Africa have an advantage in. Agricultural sector is not just about production. It's about adding value. It's about developing solutions that can then be able to reduce the post-harvest losses. Simple solar dryers can help a mother in the village dry her tomatoes, her vegetables, her cassava, her beans. That way you will make money and you will charge young people to become solution providers as they address a bigger problem.
Okay.
Grow the economy from both.
Dr. Munang, maybe you land because we're coming towards the end of the program. We have 2 more minutes to end the show. Maybe you land.
The last 2 aspects is we must reimagine our financial models, because the discussion around finance is mostly about aid, and sometimes this is not really helping. What about the barter system that Africa used to use before? So if you have a herd of cattle, you can be able to pay school fees with. You have a bag of rice, you can be able to pay hospital bills with. It is high time that Africa actually legalize, every country legalize the barter system and ensure that cooperatives become part and parcel. Then the last aspect is, with that entrepreneurial spirit in the continent, it might be quite very, very difficult to drive inclusive economies. So entrepreneurship should become part and parcel of the educational curriculum of every country in the continent. That way we can drive enterprising Africa, but more importantly, every citizen needs to become passionate and start to do what he or she can do, using what he or she have, not what they expect to have. Because that's the only way you can get what you expect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Richard Munang. On that note, we come to the end of the program. Apostle Ambe, thank you so much. I see one of the viewers saying that we need much time for this program, sir. Time is too small.
Yes. Time is actually too short to handle this program because the topics are too broad to be managed within 1 hour, 30 minutes. But nevertheless, thank you for being part of today's program. We are happy for your contributions, viewers across the globe. And we'll keep on educating you as God gives us the strength and the grace.
Thank you so much, Elijah Nwaku. Thank you so much for your time, sir. We appreciate.
Thank you to all the viewers, and hopefully we can have time to discuss more on this very important topic to educate our people. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Dr. Richard Munang, who is an international development expert. I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be part of this panel.
Yeah, thank you very much, Elvis, and thanks to the viewers and to the panelists. Touch on very important aspects. It's an exciting show, and I believe that this is actually a mindset space that can take Africa to the place in which it's supposed to be. So thanks again.
Thank you to the viewers. If you want to be part of this show, you can join us. You can write to me using the number you find on your screen, which is the number you find on your screen on WhatsApp. And of course, you can join the panel and also join our WhatsApp group where we discuss African issues. I'm talking about experts in all domains. They do this mostly because of their love for Africa, because they want to give back to the continent. Thank you, Apostle Ambe Valentine. He is most sought international consultant by African governments and also foreign governments on issues related to democracy, issues related to governance and development. Also to Elijah Enoaku is an international researcher on African affairs, consultant with many organizations worldwide. Dr. Richard Munang is the African Regional Climate Change Coordinator at the United Nations Environment Program. These are consultants that are highly consulted by international organizations across the world. Today's edition of 90 Minutes in Africa was supervised by Kum Leonard. We want to thank our entire production team for their efforts, and the program was coordinated by Kum Leonard and then supervised by the CEO, Brian Ambe. I am Boh Elvis. Thank you for watching. Hoping to see you next week for another edition of the program, God willing. Thank you and have a wonderful day.